Drako witnessed Zimbabwean hyperinflation firsthand and introduced Kuva to help those in crisis share and store their wealth. He's also a Bitcoin maxi with stories going all the way back to the days of Mt. Gox. This is a big one. Here's Drako. Welcome to Sat Chats, the Bitcoin podcast where we chat about sats. Sats are the smallest part of a Bitcoin, the same way pennies are the smallest part of a dollar. With Sat Chats, we are building the world's biggest Bitcoin welcome center to serve as your gateway to generational wealth. So if you are new to Bitcoin, we want to chat about sats with you. Head to satchats.com to grab your slot in the studio today. I am your host, Stuart, Bitcoin maxi, who wears prescription sunglasses to protect you and your loved ones from my Bitcoin laser eyes.
And I'm your co-host, Chris, founder and CEO of Ithaca Hummus, proud multi-coiner and Bitcoin smash buyer.
Smash!
Head to our YouTube, smash the subscribe button, because if you do, you will be entered to win 1 million sats, so long as you are one of our first 1,000 subscribers. The other thing, once we hit 1,000 subscribers,
Well, that's phase 4.
We are going to open up a live stream Friday mornings, 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time.
So today in the virtual studio, we have got Drako. Drako is the CEO of Kuva, and he is a Bitcoiner, which means he has a nice, clean Bitcoin story for us today. Now, before we jump into that Bitcoin story, Drako, help our Satillionaires get to know you a little bit.
Sure, yeah. Well, my name's Drako. I'm from New Zealand, which is a tiny little country kind of in the Pacific Ocean somewhere. You can look it up. What's a few things to know about me? One is that, I've never had a job. I've always run technology businesses from my late teens. And then I had a successful technology business way back when, a little computer hardware keylogger that we used to make back in the day in the 90s. And from there on in, really never had to get a traditional job again. I really enjoy setting up businesses, and in particular, my background is in computer and electronic engineering. So I do like to work with technology to solve the bigger problems, particularly stuff that's very kind of disruptive or different, or bringing in technology to make things much more efficient for different kinds of business sectors. So I've got all sorts of businesses that I've set up and been involved with, everything from market research, technology businesses, financial services businesses, a network customer experience business that I set up. What else? Some of these things, I even started to invest in a few businesses and helped out various other CEOs as well. That's another thing I do, is help people out to work out where the real value is in their business and how to express that, and provide some mentorship and objectivity to people who do run businesses, because I always found it very useful for myself. You can't read the label from inside the jar, if you know what I mean. And I've come across Bitcoin a long time ago. I'll give you the full story in a bit, but I'm on the creditor list of Mt. Gox back in the day.
Does that mean that you had Bitcoin on the Mt. Gox exchange when it went down, and you were like, you need to wait around for your Bitcoin to come back? Is that what that means?
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah, so they've got a list on there. When people say, "Oh, were you really around way back when?" I'm like, "Look, just you can download the creditor list. I'm on there." And the other thing is, there were other exchanges that I had, in the early days, like MintPal and things like that. They all went down. That we never saw our money back. Mt. Gox actually paid us all back a sixth of our holdings last year. Incredible. So after 10 years of the Japanese receivers working on getting everyone reconciled and recovering whatever they could in terms of the remaining coin, when that business went insolvent, when Mt. Gox went insolvent, which was quite a ride really, because that was where I think 90% of where everyone was trading, right? So it was a huge exchange. But they came through. They pulled through, and they paid some of it back, and it was worth a lot more than it was way back when the exchange collapsed.
So to be clear, if they finally got, after a decade, to a point where they were able to pay you back 1/6 of the amount of Bitcoin that you had, which is effectively, what is that? 16%, 17% of what you were holding. You're not so hurt about it, because by the time you got back even 16 to 17% of the Bitcoin you had, the appreciation is so great that you're like, you know what? I'm not even mad. I'm just glad I got some of it.
Oh no, I'm not joking. I mean, I made 10 times what I put into it even then, even though they gave us a sixth back. So I think I lost, and because I have all these screenshots of when I was trying to get the funds out, because I had something like, I think it was like 30 Bitcoins on there or something. And then I managed to get out a fair bit, and then there was 9 Bitcoin left. And so that's what was left while the exchange was collapsing, because it was very unusual. The withdrawals were failing, but not every withdrawal. So you'd redo it, and then you might get a withdrawal. It's very weird, like right at that point where it was failing. But yeah, I ended up getting 9.04 Bitcoins stuck in there. And I think they gave me back about just under 1.5 Bitcoins. So that was just a nice little bump, for hanging around for 10 years.
I want to go back even further, before Mt. Gox, before Bitcoin. What conditions were you operating under that led to your discovery of Bitcoin?
So I just set up a business. So one of the things I did was I had a business called Visions Live. It was a market research business, and we built these little communities for people to go and chat about things that were like, businesses would set them up, and they would say, okay, here's a bunch of people who eat cheese, or here's a bunch of people who use this particular shoe or this tennis racket. And so we would set up these communities for manufacturers and brands to talk to these potential customers or people within the profile, that's the persona that would be buying their products. And the interesting thing is, the big corporates, they're very disconnected from their customer base. So what my platform would do would be, be able to set up these focus groups and communities where people can have long form discussions about proposed new branding, communications, all this kind of stuff. And I ended up having a couple of years working at the Royal Bank of Scotland, which is the UK's largest bank. It's a 400-year-old bank. And when I say working at it, I was brought in as a management consultant, which was for my own business. So we had a business that was doing this management consulting for these sorts of communities, to build a community for the bank. And it was a huge project. And what I learned was that, not to put too much a fine pin on it, but Royal Bank of Scotland is like a huge imploding star. Like there's no ability for them to innovate anything. And you got to combine the insight from 2 years working at the highest level. Like I was working with the CEO of business and commercial. That's the level that we were at the bank. And they were trying to innovate this business network to try and, bring some additional value to just holding a bunch of accounts and then, placing people's funds, in various investments. So what I got out of that was like, these banks are not going to innovate any kind of new digital money. There's just no way. They're barely capable of releasing a banking app. And the kinds of people that work in this place, they're not interested in changing anything in particular at all. Like, it's not their job. Their job is to maintain the status quo. And this is a 400-year-old bank. Think about this timeline. 400-year-old bank. What that looks like today with all of its history. So it has a lot of prestige. And but it just didn't have that edge. And one time, so my brother, he called me once, and he said, I was in a bar. I was actually in a pub, and I was with a founder. So me and another business partner of mine had founded a fintech. It was called Regent FE, or Currency Cart. And this was a straight through processing deliverable foreign exchange platform that we built and released back in like 2012, I think it was 2011, 2012. And then my brother says, hey, have you heard of this stuff called this? It's a thing called Bitcoin. It's like an electronic money. And I think he was able to get at that time, or a little, maybe it was even before that, before we even set up Regent. But at that time, I think it was like $1.50 a Bitcoin or something like that. And he said, look, there's this guy in Germany, whatever, he can sell me 1,000 of these for like 1,500 euros or whatever. And I asked my business partner, who's also a bit conservative, and I say, oh, Bitcoin, have you heard of Bitcoin? And the first thing he says to me is, it's a scam. And I was like, oh, I said, Alex says this thing is a scam. And Theo's and my brother's like, oh, okay, all right, well, we left it at that. And so that's the first I actually heard of it. And I just had this dude shouting at me that it was a scam, and I didn't even think about it. But I kind of percolated in the back of my head for quite some time. And then I did a little search on it and started to look around about what it was about. And I was really fascinated by this whole concept of the distributed nature of, the way that it was, built with distributed network. And of course, at that time, we had your BitTorrent, you had your, other types of file sharing that was all made with distributed technologies, DHT and all of that kind of stuff. And I was super interested in that stuff as well. And I remember there was the white paper, the first version of it, which I think would come out in 2008. And I remember going through it and I was just thinking, what cluster of geniuses has put this together? Like, it was just incredible. So just every piece of it, the branding in particular, Bitcoin. I like branding. I like the good branding, the story, the concept of a blockchain, the way that you had the mining and the proof of work, the way that was able to like automatically kind of limit the and make the distribution happen, but also limit it to something that was allowing the introduction of this money into this ecosystem. So many aspects of it that was so interesting. All the digital signatures, the way that addresses worked for Bitcoin, all this was very new. And I just thought, you know what, I'm just going to start to play around. So I did a little bit of mining. I set up a little miner on my Mac. I was playing around with some of the tech. We were transferring between the wallets. This is before your BIP wallets, your BIP44, your Passphrase wallets. So all of the standard Bitcoin wallet, it kept all the addresses. You don't want to lose that Bitcoin.dat file, or you're going to lose everything. Right, back in the day, it was terrible. Wallet recovery was a nightmare. And just transferring it, watching the confirmations come through, and it was kind of like, I would say, like baseball cards, sort of. If you saw the value, if you were interested in it, if you're an enthusiast, it wasn't really money. It was just this very nascent, very interesting concept. And at some point, I just kind of clicked, and I bought most of my Bitcoins off something called local Bitcoins, because that's kind of the easiest way that you could do it at the time. And I think I just aped in, and that was it. And, I was like, I'm just going to stack a bunch of this and, play around on the exchange. These nascent exchanges, of course, got burnt by Mt. Gox, but then there was a ton of exchanges, and they all had slightly different propositions. And, it ended up becoming something that I learned a lot about. And then we'd set up this fintech. I wanted to go and do something that was going to be within crypto, because this is the other thing. The other thing that happened was I got involved with Dash. And do you guys remember Dash back in the day? It was Now this was a big coin. This was a big coin back in the day. It was the first ever DAO. It was a real DAO. I also raised for Kuva about 1.3 million worth of cash to launch that business in the Dash DAO. And we were like a real star project. And then we were also doing financial. So we were also publicly every month disclosing our financials and where we'd spent the money. And we tried to make that a discipline within the community and within people who are doing proposals. But there was no way that you're going to get scammers to agree to release where the money went. And so, I ended up leaving that project, and that's when I set up Kuva. And I mean, in the middle of all of that, we set up Kuva, but when we really got things going, once we'd left the Dash ecosystem, and we set up our own network. And now it's a little different. It's a private network and a fintech, but that's kind of a brief history of time for my involvement in crypto. And actually, I think at this point, we're the only business that started in Dash as a proposal and has survived. And that was from 2018.
So there is a big slice of history that you participated in, like firsthand. And we heard about an early introduction to Bitcoin where you could have gotten like 1,000 Bitcoin for $1,500. I mean,
I could have. I didn't though. I didn't. I wish I did. I bet you the guy that sold the guy that got his pizza for 20,000 coin. I can understand why, because it was just so cool to get something physical for that. But you got to look at things. It was not the way. Bitcoin did not appear the same way to what people understand it to be today way back then. It was just, you can't, the concepts were different. I can't explain it. Like, you have to have been able to see this by yourself, the future concept of Bitcoin. You have to see it, because what you were buying at the time was like baseball cards or stamps or, I don't know, Pokemon. It was just a very cool concept that had that potential. And not every cool concept that has the potential ends up like, being some $1 trillion thing. You know what I mean? But there was a bunch of people around that time, and we had the kind of the hope for it that it would be something that would be like internet money, or this is the future of, where value exchange and transactions were going to go, and the internet needed something like this. But was this going to be the winner? Who knows, right? Was it going to be Dash? Was it Ethereum? Was it smart contracts? Was it one of these new generation ones, like, you had EOS and Tezos, now you have like Solana and, Poly and all that. Who knows what's going to win? And even now, we're kind of, I would say, I'm very Bitcoin maxi. Very Bitcoin maxi. And so everything else for me, I want to give you guys a perspective from the over a decade I've been involved with this whole blockchain caper. I think I've understood what it is that's going on, particularly with the meme coins and everything else. It's a very interesting game. So if you give me a minute, I want to explain that in a bit. But over to you, because sometimes I can talk a lot.
And if I can just do this real quick, because I love to experience pain, and I just want to sit here. If Bitcoin's at 90,000, then that would be 900,000, 9 million, 90 million. 1,000 Bitcoin for $1,500 back in the day would be $90 million today, which is incredible to think about. And part of the reason why it's like when people say, well, hey, I mean, there's only so much, yada, yada, it's like you don't get that your Bitcoin will buy you more and more over time. You're not putting that together,
I'll tell you another story. So my brother, so I have some cousins and people that we convinced to buy some Bitcoins, and then they went up a little bit, it might be going from like a few $100s to like $1,500. And then I remember one of my cousins sold some coin to buy a car. And my brother said, this is going to be the most expensive car that you've ever bought. And indeed it was, because I think they sold it like, $1,500 a coin. But if you held on to that, you'd be doing all right. It wouldn't be a little Honda Civic or whatever she bought. I think she bought it. It's like $15,000 worth at the time. So yeah, that's $1 million car right there. But how do you know? There's no way to. If you could tell the future, you just hold your coin forever. But you just don't know. And let's not forget, there's been these like dramatic rises and falls in the value of Bitcoin that makes it look like some kind of not like one scheme, but it just makes it look like a bubble. And so people look at that and they go back and they look at history and they say, well, every time something like this happens, it was a bubble. But then they forget the features of a bubble. Like usually the utility of the thing that there was involved with a bubble, right? The thing that was bubbled, if you really stand back and look at it, most of those bubbles didn't really have much utility. And even the ones where people consider that they were a bubble, like you always hear about the tulips in Holland and all that back in 400 years ago. Well, guess what? If you go to Amsterdam now, they are the center of the flower trade. That wasn't a bubble. They just established an industry, and I think it's the world's biggest. So some of the things that people call bubble and then go and compare Bitcoin to, you'd be remiss if you were to like take that as a negative, because some of these bubbles have established industries that have lasted for hundreds of years. And I'm pretty sure that Bitcoin in particular is going to be one of those. Like I'd stake pretty much everything on it. What's incredible about Bitcoin, I'll tell you the other thing that's incredible. If you have Microsoft Word or some piece of software on your computer, or even an app, right, on a phone, right, they always got bugs in them. The developer's always updating them, right? Can you imagine that other than a very small incident, I can't exactly remember when there was like a small double spend at some point, which I think they fixed. Bitcoin has never had a critical bug that's taken it down for over a decade and a half now, right? Which is fascinating for software. Fascinating, because we're used to just being able to roll out a new piece of software. If there's a bug, you can just roll out a new piece of software and fix that bug, and there's not much damage as long as no one took advantage of it. But with Bitcoin, people are running all sorts of different versions of either the node or Bitcoin nodes. They're running there's a number of all these versions working, and yet we've never had like an exploit or a compromise that has really caused a disaster. I'm not saying that that's not going to happen in the future, but just the way it was architected, it's a very unique piece of software, and it's a very unique history that software has, and has had to be resilient in this way as well. We can't have a single exploit on this network. Let's say there's an exploit where like 30% of the coins just all get double spent, everything gets a mess. That will take down the entire network. It's finished. Bitcoin would be finished. And I just found it fascinating that never eventuated. It was a worry back in the day. Let me tell you, people were like, well, will it? Will someone work out some crazy wormhole? Because you look at Ethereum, you have multiple contract exploits. You see, because of the fact that anyone can write a contract, put it up there, and you can write bugs. It can be bugs in that code. Whereas Bitcoin is a lot more careful and measured. Getting a BIP out on Bitcoin is extremely difficult to have like that go live. Even the likes of SegWit V2. I remember when SegWit, the original proposals were going through, and they just never made it, even though it was a very useful improvement to the network. And then we had Taproot, and that took years to come out, and they've rolled that out now, and so it's a very interesting. I'm very fascinated by the infrastructure and the way that it evolved. It really is a once in history kind of event, right? You can go and clone the Bitcoin core code. You can clone the Bitcoin code if you like everything. The wallet. There's multiple implementations. You can roll out your own blockchain network, but there's not going to be any value there, right? It's not about the software itself. It's about the consensus that this is the store of value. It's in the same way, like you look at gold, right? Gold is this ancient store of value, but it can't be developed any further, right? The only thing that has been done, and I think it's a backwards move, is to turn gold into like digital gold, if you like, and have reserves that are represented by some kind of account that's held on a database. But there's a huge amount of fake gold, particularly in China, because they just mix it with tungsten, and then it's very hard to detect that something's gold, and it's just being held in a vault somewhere. You can't just send real gold over the internet or divide it up into small bits, right? There's this need and this pressure for something to allow this, international commerce to happen and value exchange to happen, and gold does not meet that. But it has been a medium of exchange for so long that people, as the consensus is there, right? The consensus is there. There's no use for gold really, other than plating contacts on electronics, and very little of it's used for that. Its main value is as a store of value. So if you can find something else, like this is where Bitcoin is so interesting. If you can find something where everyone agrees that this is a store of value, and then you can have some reference ways that can exchange into real world assets and services and products and so on, then we're making history. We're making history here. And that's why I'm so interested in Bitcoin, because also you've got to think about this finance. I say this as my own little saying, finance is the ground under your feet, right? If you look at where you guys are, where anyone is, are you in a park? Are you in a house? Anything? What do you think put that there and allowed you to have access to that? It's usually like in the modern world, for right or wrong, rightly or wrongly, it's finance. And so when you're messing around with Bitcoin, you're messing around with the fundamental societal component that allows society to function at all. It allows resources to move at all. It's really very fascinating because it's such a foundational layer to modern society. And this is the thing that, we are disrupting now. I always found it interesting to look at, and to think about how these things might disrupt the status quo, and then where does that lead the society that's utilizing this new disruptive technology? What are the improvements? What are the downfalls? Because there are also negatives with having an absolute reference that no one can change in terms of a store of value. It can become tyrannical. A blockchain can be very tyrannical because depends on who controls it. If it ends up being, one of the large, BlackRock or JP Morgan or these huge banks that end up having huge reserves, and then they pull the shots, then we're back where we started, right? As far as trying to make a fairer world and trying to build efficiencies and trying to disrupt the status quo. We're back where we started. And that's not the original intention of Bitcoin. The original intention of Bitcoin is a fairer world and a better way of doing things, and internet money, and more possibilities enabled with this technology.
Drako, what do you think the risk of that is? Like a small faction of central banks, nation states coming to get together and one day colluding around a network like the Bitcoin network?
Can you imagine? It could be a Bitcoin network, or the value that's within the Bitcoin network could be captured by anyone who's big enough, right? Just because it's a distributed network, it doesn't mean if someone owns half the coins or a bunch of that liquidity, then they're going to call the shots. And yeah, I mean, that's already kind of starting to happen, right? You have these institutional funds. Everyone is so overjoyed by ETFs, but where do you think all of that is going to be held and controlled? It's not. It was originally, there was a lot of kind of freedom, revolutionary kind of thinking around what Bitcoin could be, but it's kind of inevitable. It initially gets fought. You look at this curve of I call it the evolutionary revolutionary curve, right? You have first they ignore you, then they fight you, then they join you, right? It's very similar to the browser wars back in the day of the 90s. It's there was Netscape. It was all open source. Everything's great. Where's Netscape now? It's called Google Chrome, and they take all your data, right? And so I don't want to be cynical about it, but I just want to make sure people are aware. Bitcoin is not some freedom answer to everything, because it's still open to, it being conquered and captured by the very institutions where that it was designed to overcome. You look at the first the first block, the text in there. What was it? There's an article about the times and the financial crisis, and it was a little jab into the ribs of the banks. But guess what? Give this a few years, and who do you think is going to own the majority of Bitcoin?
I wonder, because when I look at the total amount of Bitcoin held by corporations, it's around the 11% mark. And there are nation states coming into the fold. Of course, El Salvador, wonderfully, faithfully, dollar cost averaging in with 1 Bitcoin per day, no matter what. My understanding is that the lion's share of Bitcoin is still held by individuals who just happen to be whales with tens of thousands of coins, and they got in early, they understood it early, and they're benefiting from that. So I guess, you would need these institutions and nation states to gobble up all newly mined Bitcoin from miners. And you would need them to pay a premium to the people who have been hodling for years. And then maybe at that point, it becomes quasi captured or certainly just less distributed. But if I'm hanging on to my Bitcoin, my little share should go up significantly to where, I mean, I don't know if this is bad to say, but if nation states and institutions have 40% of all Bitcoin, and I'm over here and I've got a couple million sats, but that still allows me to go put my feet up in the Black Forest of Germany, like I'm pretty sure I'm going to do that. You know what I mean? Like I believe in Bitcoin, but I'm also a greedy little troll.
Right. Right. I mean, can I tell you, and that greedy little troll is, no one can say greedy little troll. People have self-interest and they want the comfort, and they want to use the asset. What's the point in dying, having like holding a bunch of money? I had an uncle who died with like over $500,000 in the bank, and they lived like, they didn't live like they had $500,000 in the bank. Let me tell you that. They just kind of hoarded that money and left it go. Now, the question is like, where does it go as you spend it? And I would say that actually the majority of the coin in the world is probably held by most of the exchanges right now. They're the new financial they're definitely a service to the government and the financial services companies. And then, yes, you have some whales, but they too will eventually kind of relinquish and, utilize that wealth to enjoy their lives, as you say. And then if you look at it, I call the shift. It's like a one-way kind of flow of all the money to whoever's playing the long game. And actually, it's more about that they are able to utilize that liquidity in the long game. And that is financial institutions. I don't think the Royal Bank of Scotland is going to be buying any Bitcoin soon. But a lot of these new fintechs, neobanks, JP Morgan, the forward-looking banks, Barclays, JP Morgan, these guys, they're definitely accruing good reserves. They're definitely interested in all the regulatory environment around that to really facilitate the transfer of Bitcoin into their holdings. And you might even find that Bitcoin that's been hanging around or being traded for a while, right, would be considered to be, close, it would be I won't call it money laundering, but it's going to be something where a bank won't want to take it on if it's been around in the wild, being held by individuals and traded around for too long, unless you give it a history. So when the bank holds it, they say, oh, we can give that history. They work with government and regulators to say, right, we need to make sure that all the coin is clean, as it were, right? And then just implicitly make anyone who's holding coins a little bit dodgy. And maybe in the future, they could be quite criminal if you don't declare the coin that you have, etc. Because the government can put these regulations into play and work with the institutions. And that's, I don't want to be cynical around it. I just want to say it's always good to be vigilant of the potential of these things, because then maybe you take action to, assist in things not going that way. And there being more freedom in the world. And there has to be people who do that. I feel that's one of my roles. That's why I have Kuva, right? I want to make money better. That's my main tagline, right? It's making money better. I want people to have the freedom to store value, trade, and do the business and, bring whatever they want into the world that they feel that they are compelled to do without due hindrance, right? Like that financial freedom is more than just, I can get a loan. Financial freedom is like, yeah, you can do the things you need to do with your money to build your wealth and to execute on what you feel you're put on earth to do. I've always felt that way, right? So, I like to think that it's good to be vigilant of what issues could arise. You can't just blindly hold Bitcoin and leave it at that. There's got to be people who are working to maintain its, the freedom of Bitcoin, if you like, and underlying that, the true financial freedom that Bitcoin was brought to earth to bring to the people in the first place.
So We feel like on this show, by helping new people stack their first sats and take them into self-custody, right? Because we send them our sats to a wallet they custody. We are doing our little part to decentralize the holdings of Bitcoin, right? Every day, 5 days a week, we're talking to two people and getting them their first 50 to 60,000 sats. And we're hoping that we're doing our little part to decentralize Bitcoin and get people started in on this journey that, often takes them ultimately to a point where they want to get to your level, which is, they've moved past the I'm holding on and I'm never selling to I need to actively safeguard the principles and the goals of Bitcoin. We believe that hopefully they'll get to that space, right? But Drako, when you think about Bitcoin, because you spent a long time in the space, and I have many questions for you, but what do you think needs to be done to protect Bitcoin moving into the future? And how does Kuva play into that?
So I'll tell you one of the reasons just address a couple of things. One is you guys are OGs. Yeah, that's great. You're helping to spread and show people like this new kind of money, how it works. Well done. And also self-custody, very important. I feel, I'm all about self-custody. That is the whole point of Bitcoin in the first place. Don't leave it on exchange. I learned my lesson a long time ago. Don't need that to be repeated. If it's not in your wallet, it's not your money. And that their concept is something that I think should be put far and wide. The other thing I want to say is not everybody is an enthusiast, and they don't have to be. They can reap the benefits of technology and what it does in their life. They can reap those benefits, and they don't really need to know too much about the depth around it. But it's good to have a place like with you guys where you're encouraging people to become enthusiasts. I think it's fantastic, right? I could say I'm definitely an enthusiast. So I like the concept of it. I'm an enthusiast of many things in tech that bring a lot of value to people, and that I like to understand what the problems could be, the compromises. Nothing is perfect. Bitcoin's not perfect. This new AI world isn't perfect. It has these detrimental things that you should be aware of, and then you are able to better respond to them, and you're able to better utilize that technology so that we're not enslaved by it, but it actually empowers us. So what I did, it's been quite a ride with Kuva. That was started in late 2017. And it was just before it's a Zimbabwean company. It was between Zimbabwe and the UK. And it was just before Robert Mugabe, who was a dictator for 37 years in Zimbabwe. It was just before, a few weeks before, he was deposed as dictator. And then he died, I think, the next year at age 93. Can you imagine this? And he'd really run the country into the ground. And they destroyed. So if you know a bit about Zimbabwe, that is the country. It's in that country that the highest amount of hyperinflation has ever occurred in human history. It went to 8 billion%. And if you look, they actually made a documentary about us entering Zimbabwe with this new kind of money. And the documentary is called Starting From Scratch. So if you type Starting From Scratch Zimbabwe on YouTube, well, that's me and my now ex-co-founder in Zimbabwe. And it really shows like why we went in there, because people were saving all this money, working hard, right? Hard work. Might have $30,000, $40,000 as a pension fund, because it's also not a wealthy country. Especially after post Mugabe, or even while Mugabe was in there, he robbed the country blind. And then that money overnight turns to nothing. Now, they've done this no less than 5 times to people. So what ends up happening, so there's various Zimbabwean dollars. You might have seen the $100 trillion note. You couldn't buy a box of matches with that $100 trillion note back in the day. That was around the 2008. And then, they've had the bond, they've had another Zimbabwe dollar, they've had the ZiG. And all these currencies have effectively collapsed. And so what happens, it's a very interesting state of society because people don't trust the government there to issue money. It's interesting. Think about it. What would happen if there's a loss of confidence in the government and the Reserve Bank to issue money, and people don't have any confidence in that money retaining its value? It's this very interesting state that happens where the money's like a hot potato, and as soon as you've got it, you've got to get rid of it. Because when I was there, I got trapped in Zimbabwe for 6 months at the beginning of COVID, actually, which is another wild story. There were people, like, it was mad. We're in a gated compound. There were guys with AK-47s outside hiding in the bushes. Everyone was paranoid to go to the supermarkets. And, you still had to trade. And the supermarkets at the time, hyperinflation started to go up. I'll give you an idea. The money had gone to 18 to 1. And 6 months later, it was 130 to 1. So just completely blown out. That's $130 to US dollar. And then a person last year sent me a picture of a loaf of bread, $10,000, right? So they've lost control again, destroyed the currency. Then they reissued this new currency, which is supposed to be gold backed. And then this is getting destroyed now as well. So, people just don't trust the government, the Reserve Bank, to issue money. So the economy is basically dollarized again. So what everyone uses is US dollars in Zimbabwe if they want to hold value for the long term. And the government's trying to do their initiatives to fix this. They would like to have their own currency, but then the fiscal discipline needs to be in a lot better a place for that to happen. What better a place to come and introduce like a Bitcoin? Because you got your Bitcoin on your own wallet, you hold that value. Good news that it's going up all the time. Generally, it's kind of like a hospital chart. It kind of looks like this, right? Whoop. So in the long term, it seems to doing that. That's a good thing. But I can't tell you like how valuable it is to have a store of value that doesn't like have the floor just drop underneath, drop out of it. And that is why we launched Kuva in Zimbabwe, because we wanted a solution where people can hold their money, can preserve value, and do what they want with that money. Transact with it. We build a wallet. We did all this other stuff. But I don't want to go into the issues around it. We're more about self-custody being quite difficult at this time for the demographic of the population that we were dealing with. Right. This is a population who, when we arrived in North America, people were on their 10th smartphone, and in Zimbabwe, people were coming onto their first smartphone, and they still didn't have a data plan. So you got to imagine, like, there's all these like issues with just getting Bitcoin running. You say, well, just have a smartphone, and you'll be able to transact. Well, you need a data plan, and I think it's like 80% of people don't have a data plan that can do that. So we were fighting against that a bit. But I think in the long run, that's going to be one of the first places that ahead of even like in El Salvador, where the currency is like a Bitcoin or something where people can hold that value, is going to be the most useful. It's where the currency has failed so many times that, you've just got to look for an alternative. To give you an illustration a little bit more about this, people were taking aluminum tubes or cinder blocks and then buying them as quickly as they could with the money they had and dumping them with a tarpaulin in their backyard, because those cinder blocks or the aluminium piping or whatever it was would hold its value more than the local currency. They could always sell it or trade it. So medium of exchange had been at least the government issued one had been ruined. I got to see that firsthand. It was very interesting. I'm telling you. I have so many stories about that.
So it's incredible to hear your story of experiencing inflation firsthand through the Zimbabwean people. There were stories in the Weimar Republic after World War I in Germany of people buying their first cup of coffee at 5,000 German marks, and their second cup of coffee 15 minutes later was 8,000 marks. And complaints of restaurant goers who order their dinner for this much money, and by the time the tab comes to them, it's that much money.
So I was going to say, in Zim, there was a guy running around with one of those little pricing guns, at the supermarket, changing prices just all day, putting price up all day. And then can you imagine, because we deal with these people, right? The supermarkets, and can you imagine the owners of that business, what they have to do with the cash that's in the cash register, like right there and then? Like they can't be holding that money for longer than half a day. It's bedlam. There were kids with, this is the other thing. So you go to the supermarket car park and there were kids with duffel bags full of banknotes, brand new banknotes, Zimbabwean banknotes, and they would trade you those notes for US dollars because some things you'd have to pay with the local money. And so there was a whole systemic corruption thing, whatever it was, where these kids, just 16-year-olds with little hatchbacks, that open up the hatchback and unzip these bags, and they'd give you stacks of notes like this for your $10. Like, it was crazy. I've never seen anything like that before or since. And like I say, I'm considered like myself lucky to have felt what it's like to live in that society where it was just money was a hot potato. It was so dysfunctional.
And if hyperinflation is devastating, then by extension, inflation, regular old American 2 to 3% inflation, is also devastating, but we just don't know it because it happens a lot slower. It's still happening. We're still having our purchasing power getting ground into nothing, but it's not at the level where we have duffel bags in the back of our hatchback. So many of us are unwilling to take that leap and stack our first sats in Bitcoin. And because the problem isn't as acute for someone in America as it is for someone in Zimbabwe or the Weimar Republic, right? So let's recap this conversation here with Drako. We have gone on a big fat journey through Bitcoin time with Drako, which included, like many others, an opportunity to buy Bitcoin at a hilariously low price. No thanks. Maybe some other time. Some guy told me it was a scam. That's as far as I'm going to look into it for now. And, you come back later, it starts to make sense. You're one of the OGs, and I appreciate you calling us some OGs. I mean, we're original gangsters if somebody who started looking at this seriously in 2024 can be considered an original gangster.
You're the flames.
Yeah, there you go. I'm happy to keep rolling, but definitely not. Maybe a G, not an OG. But definitely with your coins on Mount Gox, you're out there for 10 years only to get a sixth of it back. But it's appreciated so greatly by then. Who even cares? That's just the beautiful, it's going up forever, Laura, kind of deflationary aspect of Bitcoin at play. And, your life, it has been a series of tech-driven companies that have explored ways to solve problems. Your latest venture there is Kuva, which was deployed in Zimbabwe, basically dropped right down into the middle of modern day hyperinflation. And we don't have too many examples of hyperinflation happening in today's world. And it's really interesting to hear your personal experiences there, the different challenges, what that does to a country, what that does to commerce, a guy who's continually updating prices all day long, teenagers exchanging US dollars for stacks of Zimbabwean cash out of their duffel bags. And it sounded like Kuva was built on a solid, maybe even blockchain foundation that today allows its users to exchange different currencies in and among one another, but also has some Bitcoin functionality. And maybe over time, more and more people will come to Kuva to use it for Bitcoin. And there is so much to talk about when it comes to Bitcoin. There's some things you said that I wasn't even able to touch upon in today's show, but we do ask each of our guests to come back on in 9 months to give us an update on their Bitcoin baby. So would you be willing to come back on in 9 and we can keep unpacking just your personal experience, some of the things you said today, some of the thoughts you have about for the future.
Yeah, I mean, always. It'd be interesting to see how things have changed. Yeah. Yeah. So let's do it.
So let's do it. We're going to make you an offer here for your time, Drako. But, sitting at the feet of an original gangster requires us to burn lots of mental calories. So we're going to refill ourselves before making you your offer here. I'm going to serve as your taste buds in the studio today, trying a tub of Ithaca hummus. Whoever filled out your form, Drako, they chose lemon garlic on your behalf. So
lemon garlic is my jam. Yeah.
So we have an amazing dip sponsor here at Sat Chats. It's called Ithaca Hummus. If you can see here, obviously Stuart's got it in his hand. It's my company. I'm the founder. I'm the CEO. We are looking for a chip sponsor. And today we've got not the non-discrete woven wheat crackers unbranded that we typically roll with. Today we're using Back to Nature Harvest whole wheat crackers.
Okay.
And these are amazing. My family has been buying these exact crackers since my kids were tiny, for years. But anyway, we got the lemon garlic hummus with the woven wheat cracker. Let's give it a try.
Here we go. Let's go.
Wow.
So obviously that lemon garlic hummus that's your original flavor, right?
First flavor right here. Yeah.
So delicious.
Yeah.
So full of a lemon flavor, but also garlic, but it's not too,
No.
it's like just enough of each flavor.
Yeah, it's perfectly balanced.
We do have a generic woven wheat cracker here on the show, and this Back to Nature, it feels a little bit thicker. It feels like it's woven more tightly, I guess is what I can say.
I think it is thicker. I also think that it might have just a touch more flavor. Like I prefer the Back to Nature over the just the standard woven wheat that we sometimes use here.
Now, where can Drako get Ithaca hummus in the greater Austin area?
Well, Drako, as you probably know, Whole Foods is headquartered in Austin. So, in every Whole Foods, if you've got Sprouts down there in Austin, you can find us at Sprouts. We're launching at Kroger right now. We're launching at H-E-B right now. Pretty much anywhere you shop. So,
what we want you to do, Drako, next time you hit one of these stores, pick up some lemon garlic Ithaca hummus right there in the square tub, try it, and then come back to the comment section of your Sat Chats video. Tell us what you thought about it, okay?
Alrighty. I can do that, I feel. I've got a great H-E-B up the road, the brand new one, actually.
So, Ithaca hummus, buy the dip. Let's make Drako his offer.
All right, Drako. So we believe in value for value here on the Sat Chats podcast, which is why, as a small token of appreciation for your time and your story today, we want to offer you the choice between $50 US, $50 bill right there. It will come to you without the frame. Just saying, it's not going to be all dressed up like that. So frame is a nice touch, but $50 or $50 worth of Bitcoin, which if we look at the Clark Moody Bitcoin dashboard behind me, we can see that the exchange rate, not the price, the exchange rate of one Bitcoin is 88,060 US dollars right now, which translates to 1,136 sats per dollar. And I'm going to multiply that by 50 to get your $50 worth of Bitcoin is right now 56,800 sats, or you got the $50 bill here.
Which is, before you choose here, $50. That will likely buy you $20 worth of stuff later. Or $50 worth of Bitcoin, 56,800 sats. That's guaranteed to buy you more than $50 worth of stuff later. Which one you want?
I mean, it's obvious, boys.
Yeah.
I'll take the sats. I'll take the sats. Come on. I'll take the sats. Who's not going to take the sats? Who's not going to take the sats?
Well, four people so far.
Can you see the scoreboards behind Stuart?
You probably can't see it from this angle. You might be able to see this one, Drako. So you are number 46, Drako. That is your Sat Chats number. You will forever be enshrined as
46.
You do bring our scoreboard to 42 guests who chose the Sats, 4 who chose the cash. So we love that you are helping us keep our streak alive. We want to get to triple digits on the Sats before the cash even gets to double digits. You're also the second Kiwi on the show, and you bring the total number of Kiwis who chose the Sats to 2. So New Zealand is 2 for 2. Let's go. I also want our Satillionaires to find me the first Kiwi and put his number and his name in the comment section of Draco's video. We'll do a YouTube short just for you.
Mm-hmm.
This is the part in the show where we ask you, Satillionaires, for your value in exchange for ours. Smash the like and subscribe on YouTube. Be among the first 999 plus 1 subscribers on YouTube. You will be entered into a drawing for a 1 million sat giveaway. You will also be putting your efforts toward unlocking a live show Friday mornings at 10 a.m. We'll also take the bell notification if you want to mess around with that. We'd love a 5-star review on Spotify for all of our sales reps who are windshield warriors driving around their territories every single day. Hit us with them 5 stars. Engage with us wherever you are, however you can, because we want to chat about Sats with you, your sibling, your parent, your child, your grandma. We'll take the grandmas too.
Everybody.
We'll take them. Not mine, but we'll take yours. Thanks so much again, Drako. It's been an incredible conversation. Can't wait to have you back in 9 months. Remember,
wait.
What do we got?
I'm sorry. Drako, do you, if you'd like our audience to connect with you, if you have anything business-wise that you want to announce or plug, we do want to give you an opportunity to share how we can get in touch with you and any business that we could support.
Facts.
Nice. I appreciate that, boys. I also appreciate you guys having me on the show and letting me kind of tell my stories. I've got a secret story which I'll share with you guys. That's ready to be not so secret. Yeah, I've got a real good one too. It's pretty wild. So I'm on Instagram. I've got my one to follow is at Drako Sapien, which is Drako Sapien. Yeah, I just kicked off that little account and spit some truths. But appreciate being on the show, guys. Very good. Thoroughly enjoyed it. It's good to share.
At Drako Sapien is where you can find Drako. And I guess one last brand new announcement. If you'd like to support the show with your Bitcoin, with your Lightning network, you can find our on-chain address and our Lightning address in the show notes. Okay, so hit us with your Bitcoin on chain or zap us your sats, satchats@getalby.com. It'll help power the show. So remember, Sat Chats is for educational purposes only and should not be construed as financial advice. Also, our guests' views and their duffel bags of Zimbabwean dollars are their own. We will see you on the next one, Satillionaires. Bye-bye.